Good afternoon, everyone. Hope that y'all are having a great day. I am, I gotta be honest, I normally say I'm excited when we do these things, but I have mixed feelings because we're gonna be talking about some crazy bills that are coming up with this legislative session. So strap in your seatbelts as we talk about the 2022 legislative session. Alrighty, we can move to the next slide. So, who are we? I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Bernice. I am the regional director with For Our Future Florida, and my region is the Tampa Bay area. So, if you are in Hillsborough or Pinellas counties, you are one of my neighbors. I would love to start by introducing our guests. First, we have Lakey from Physicians for Social Responsibility. How are you doing today, Lakey?
Doing okay. As you said, it's a tough ride. Thanks.
Yeah, it definitely is hard. And our other guest today is Sam Ronan from Florida for Change. How are you, Sam?
Uh, about the same. I feel like you only have me on these to talk about terrible things. I'm happy to talk. I'm glad to be with you guys. I wish we had better things to talk about. You guys ever want to do a video about puppies?
We'll have to do one. One of these days, we'll
The
have
puppy
like
angle.
a good
Yeah.
conversation.
We'll
We're not.
chase all of this with some puppies sometime.
All right. And then last but certainly not least, we have my colleagues here at For Our Future, David and Juan. How are y'all today?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Glad to be here with you. My name is Juan Moore. I'm the I'm the regional of South Florida, the Southern District. So that's Miami-Dade County, Broward, and West Palm or Palm Beach counties. And I am in the passenger seat with you, Bernice, ready to go on this ride, this discussion with you guys. And thank you for having me.
Likewise, David here in the Orlando area with For Our Future. So really excited to be a part of the discussion and learn a little bit more about what's going on in the legislative session this year.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump right in. We can move to the next slide. So, what is legislative session? Our legislative session in Florida lasts 60 days, and during this time, bills are proposed by the House and the Senate, and bills that pass both houses will become law. So we're going to dig into a couple of different bills that are coming up this session that are, have the potential to really impact our communities across the state. But first, we want to tell you about ALEC. So who is ALEC? ALEC is a group. It's an organization, and they actually create bills, and they have legislators submit them across the country. So it's not like necessarily all the bills that we're seeing in Florida are original. Like they came up with the legislators came up with these ideas themselves. It's actually an organization that like writes these bills, and legislators can just submit them. It's an extremely harmful organization. I invite Lakey, who knows much more about ALEC than I do, to share a little bit about it with us.
Sure, thanks. So ALEC has about a 50-year head start on us. They were founded in 1973, and they're funded by large corporations. And there's several different, what we call them model bill mills, right? They create model legislation. But what makes ALEC so significant is they have a non-for-profit status, and yet they take funding from corporations, big, corporate foundations like the Koch brothers, and then they take that money and they put corporations together in direct meetings, in-person meetings with legislators, and they're fiercely secretive about what they do when they're creating their legislative agenda. They have around 800 to 1,500 different model bills that they've created. and over 2,500 different legislative members across the country. And one of the things that's really tough about ALEC is that, so ALEC stands for American Legislative Exchange Council, is that they work hand in hand with two other entities. One is called the State Policy Network, and you may know some of these. They're think tank institutes like James Madison Institute, and they get these fake academics or right-wing academics to create information, and then they use that information and they pretty much feed it to the legislatures and the legislators, right? So they feed it to the legislature itself by publishing these academic things that deny climate science, that say, Black women are to blame for welfare overuse, all this false information. And then they cross-coordinate that with power that is developed by a cooperative of corporations that come together in another secretive funding network that changes its name, almost annually, that's funded by the Koch brothers and, Walmart, Sam, the sort of big spenders across the country. And then they give campaign contributions to legislators. And so these three things work together, right? They create the bills, they fund the legislators to back the bills, and then so they give huge campaign donations and have a lot of pressure on the legislators. And then they use this corrupt and false information. A lot of the bills that we've seen, that we've been fighting against for our future, and Physicians for Social Responsibility, that are produced by the fossil fuel industry, or that are regulating, the kind of bills that we saw that push back on anti-racism movements, like HB1 last year was an ALEC model bill. Things that reduce campus free speech, that's ALEC model bills. And they're famous union busters. Every union busting bill that you see, that is the American Legislative Exchange Council. They designed Stand Your Ground, actually, Right to Work. All of that is ALEC. So every big bill that you can think of that's spread in the conservative states and has done really well across the nation, and has destroyed our ability to be able to do what's right and to fight for justice is ALEC.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Lakey. And I think part of the reason we bring this up is because they're incredibly harmful. The bills that they're pushing are the conservative agenda. And, we saw what happened last legislative session with HB1 and how that was just kind of rammed through, they pushed it through. And so it just goes to show a lot of these ideas are not original. They're ideas that are also being used in other states, and you'll see news stories about that. And the reason why is because an organization like ALEC exists.
And let me just add one more thing. Florida is heavily influenced by ALEC. So Rick Scott was an ALEC and Koch-backed governor. DeSantis is an ALEC and Koch-backed governor. His almost all of his speeches, the Stop Woke Act stuff, all of that language is coming from ALEC, and it's tricky language. They use buzzwords like freedom and liberty and prosperity, and so his whole state of the state address that was focused on freedom, but then did everything to take away freedom, especially from marginalized and working class people, comes from ALEC lawyers and ALEC communications experts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious to hear from other folks on the panel, because I think for many people in the audience, this may be the first time that they're hearing about ALEC. What was your reaction when you heard about it, and just general, how do you feel about it?
I know that it was relatively new to me when I heard about it, and it was very much sort of a. I can't really say it was a surprise. I was like, so our legislation is actually being written by a actual corporation that and it's also a big question of what are our legislators there for if they're just getting actual bills just sent to them. So yeah, that and I it brings a lot together. I think it's interesting that, at least for me, not being aware of it, but also just wondering that I think there needs to be more awareness about it, and I think that whenever we're having discussions on legislation in Congress, being able to point out and say, look, this is an ALEC bill, and that should give a lot of context to it, and that's important for folks to know whenever we're really considering what's the impact of the bill, why is it being pushed, what's the motivation for passing it, and I think that just speaks volumes to really what the reason is behind the legislation that we actually see get turned into laws.
Yeah, same here. I'm just at all how many bills are handled by ALEC. It doesn't surprise me that Rick Scott or the likes here in Florida would be involved in some organization, probably who wears hoods and dark clothes, sinister wear to stop the betterment of its citizens. But just the amount of bills that are controlled by ALEC is it should be, it should raise red flags as they're saying now, the younger group here. But yeah, it's just a surprise how many groups run. I mean, how many bills are ran by them.
Yeah, not just how many bills, but in pretty much every state in America too. They've just been so active. I know that ALEC wrote one of the bills that really strongly expanded private prisons in Arizona, and they were like a leader in private prisons and private detention facilities for immigrants. There is a great video I know David had found the other day that John Oliver did back in 2014, which just shows you how long ALEC has been very prominent and sort of under the spotlight, and yet somehow able to avoid a lot of mainstream attention. That pretty much goes through all that they've been doing and kind of gives you another run through, even though Lakey did such a good job giving everyone the background on what ALEC is and how long ALEC has been at it. Highly recommend it. It's on YouTube.
Awesome. So we're going to move to talking about some of the bills that are coming up this legislative session, and we will definitely make a note, and it's noted in each slide which one is an ALEC bill. So you'll know which one has been written by ALEC. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so the Preemption Omnibus bill, we were just talking about this. So this is basically known as Preemption bill to end all preemption bills. What is preemption? It's a fancy way to say taking away local control or the state imposing laws that don't allow local governments to do as they would want to do. So this is an ALEC model bill. I know, I think there's more than one preemption bill that's going on this legislative session. And so this is just one of them, and it's a big one. And as we know, especially like as progressives, the way we've been able to do things in the state of Florida has been at the local level, because our state government is unfortunately controlled by Republicans. And so taking away local control takes away our ability to enact progressive policies at the local level.
Which again makes sense, especially here in Florida, where we've seen, in the past, well, in the latest past here, that where our leaders have tried to stop the state or sue the state when it came to things with COVID or even teaching critical race theory. So scary to think about, to say the least.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lakey.
Sorry. I was just going to say these. I think one of the things that's really tough about these set of bills and and the bill numbers, just so you know, and we just had, they're running fairly quickly through the House and the Senate. They're definitely priorities in both chambers, and those bill numbers, they're called business damages. Is the title of the bills: SB 620, HB 569, and SB 280 and HB 403. I can put those, we can put those in the comments for you. I also put an impact statement in there so that you can have them in the comment. The tough thing about them is that the way the bills work is they allow any business, and this includes, like, I have a little one person business, an LLC. It doesn't cost very much to register a limited liability company, and with $400 you can walk down to your local courthouse and file a claim against the county or the city, any municipality, any local municipality, for any ordinance. And by that we mean everything from human rights ordinances that protect non-discrimination for lesbian, gay, transgender, non-binary people, LGBTQI plus people, to housing, to clean energy initiatives, to labor. And the minute you drop the claim, an injunction starts on the ordinance. So you don't even have to get the authority from the courts to stop the ordinance from working. The ordinance stops working the minute the claim is filed, and there's an injunction on the ordinance until the courts have settled the case. And we all know that in Florida, the courts are stacked against us. So these preemption bills affect everybody, every social, environmental, racial justice issue that we're working on.
Yeah, and I was going to say one good example of preemption is masks in school. So before the special legislative session, folks were able to, at the local level, decide, like, hey, in this county, we're going to have a mask mandate to wear in school. And DeSantis actually held a special legislative session in the fall, and they made it a law that you're not allowed to have a mask mandate in the state of Florida. And so now we're not allowed to have them. So that's just like one small example of like what preemption could look like. Cool. So on to the next horrible bill. We have one good one, I promise, for you guys at the end. So here we're talking about the anti-union bill. So this is HB 1197, Senate Bill 1458. Is a union buster bill. It complicates the process of collecting union dues, adds state burdens on unions that would make it harder for them to form or stay formed. And this is also an ALEC model bill. So it's one of the bills that was not written by any of our legislators, but somebody at ALEC.
Yeah, so I will hop in on this one. So although Alec wrote it, it was formally filed by Representative Scott Plakin from Longwood. He's a Republican in the House. And then State Senator Dennis Baxley, who's a Republican from Ocala, in the state Senate. And as simply as I can put it, it just makes the entire process of being a union and being a worker trying to organize with other workers in Florida much, much harder. It just adds a lot of gunk into the machine in very little innocuous ways that kind of don't feel like it's trying to make it impossible to be in a union, but add up into like a mountain of microaggressions until it's kind of impossible to be a union. It does it in little ways, little bureaucratic ways, like requiring new membership authorization forms for unions to form, period. And then there's different varieties of authorization form. It creates a new office that unions would have to interact with the state, and then different standards for what form you get and then how many people you need for each form. It empowers individual union members to be able to break down a union based on essentially anonymous claims, while also giving any union member the ability to automatically just leave. They can just leave. They don't have to state why. They can leave at any time. And unions can actually get fined for members leaving, as far as I understand, which leads to the next big issue, is that it impacts how unions are able to collect their dues. It makes the process much more idiosyncratic, I guess is the nice way to say it. It's very convoluted in essentially keeps public unions from being able to kind of clearly and directly get their dues from employee salaries. So essentially, instead of a straight line, it would have to go through the employer themselves, go back to the union, kind of loop around in a weird figure eight. Now, a union member individually will have the ability under this bill to challenge the renewal application period. So not only is it much harder for unions to form, it's also much harder for unions to stay formed, in which they're going to have to constantly be renewing their applications to stay a union. So what they're doing is they're empowering the little person on the ground to be able to essentially screw things up all the way at the top. So there's a lot of room there for, potentially bad faith actors to become union members. And then it only takes one to say, nah, I don't want to renew this contract. Technically, that person would then have the power to stop the process. And suddenly it becomes the whole thing where this one person can shut the entire operation down. Which brings us to my last little plank of this bill, probably the worst one. A lot of people already know that in Florida, striking for most workers is not a thing you can actually do. Sometimes there are strikes, and usually what they'll do is they'll refer to them as rallies. That kind of language is legal. This bill would tighten that up significantly, and it would also add new fines for people that are found to be striking. Essentially, what it will do is it will argue that a strike harms the public, and then it will fine based on what that proposed public harm has cost taxpayers. So it starts at $20,000 a day. They will fine a union $20,000 a day, and that's baseline. That's where it starts at. It goes higher. It's all about what they calculate, but it starts at $20,000 a day. So
That's
we have
crazy.
a bill that, we have a bill that truly just hates workers more than Florida usually hates workers. And I think functionally it would make being in a union near impossible, or so difficult that it will be impossible for unions to really expand or be anything other than sort of these inert beasts, just kind of frozen in amber. Well, we'll have a couple big unions and they will just sort of be in place as they are. And I worry about their ability to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, this bill is definitely concerning, especially for us. Like, folks know FOF is union backed. And so, anything that could impact workers and harm our ability to unionize in general is terrible for the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had more. that is the meat of the bill.
Just to back that up and drill the ALEC thing home, Senator Baxley is a long-time well-known ALEC legislator. He's been a member of ALEC since 2011 and has been caught attending 4 different ALEC conferences, all of which happen in secret. And so it takes whistleblowers to expose who's there. And he's carried multiple ALEC bills, including this one. So ALEC initiative all the way.
Yeah. And if I can throw one more thing on that I unfortunately forgot, is that there are only 2 kinds of unions that are exempted from this bill. And if you can guess what they are cops and corrections officers in prisons. They do not have any of these problems. Completely untouched.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I'm surprised, but that doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Wow. Okay, y'all. Well, we're steady moving forward here. We've got some more terrible bills before we bring you to the good stuff. We're going to talk about the Stop Woke Act. So this is HB 7, SB 148. It does a lot of things. And I'll let Lakey explain them in a second because they do a much better job than I do at explaining it. But the main thing that it does is actually gives parents the power to sue local school districts that teach lessons rooted in critical race theory. And this is also an ALEC model bill.
Yeah, there's a packet. There's a couple of critical race theory bills, but this is the big package bill that they filed on the first day of session. And the House bill HB 7 is a 27-page document. It's definitely an ALEC bill. Physicians for Social Responsibility has an interest in this bill because of the final component of the bill, which focuses on instructional materials. It's an accompaniment and a follow-up to the Parental Bill of Rights that passed last legislative session, which was also an ALEC bill and an initiative of the governor. Both of these are gubernatorial priorities, and what we've seen in the legislative session is that the governor is having way too much influence over the Senate and the House leadership, and they're all sort of ganging up and pushing his agenda through. This particular bill, that the final section is an instructional materials section. The Parental Bill of Rights that passed last legislative session allows white supremacists and conservative parents to petition for a copy of instructional materials that they object to, including applications, right? Things that like are by applications, I mean like apps on mobile phones that you can't give to people, right? Because they cost so much money. And if they don't get that material within 10 days from the superintendent, they get a slot on the school board. And so they're filing claims against LGBTQ school safe zone policies. We're seeing attempts around, removing climate science from education. We're seeing attempts, even Florida citizens. The Florida Citizens Alliance is a huge group of about 32 different organizations, includes like the Tea Party and these others. They have a objectionable materials list that includes things like Nobel Prize winner Toni Morrison's Beloved, and removing these from school, calling them pornography, and it's just a racist, homophobic, anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-trans agenda. And this particular bill will remove, on the House side, it removes the word gender from the Education and Equity Act, the statutes around education, and replaces them with sex. So it denies the fact that transgender people exist. It will remove the word ethnicity and replace it with color, so you can no longer be, say, Latinx in the state of Florida. It removes entire paragraphs from the civic education clause and replaces it, or basically narrows it down to patriotism. It narrows sex ed down to abstinence only. And then this final, ultimately destructive instructional materials clause does what the Parental Bill of Rights did last year. That was from a base level. So it gave a lot of power to those people on the ground that wanted to organize and destroy the local school board. This gives the authority for the FDOE to pretty much do the same thing. And it uses words, famous ALEC words like morality. I mean, it's just things that are left undefined, like, that you can object to materials on the basis of morality. Well, whose morality, right? What does that mean, morality? And so it's going to undermine our education system, just completely gut our. So it's more than just an attack on critical race theory, right? It's attack on all marginalized people. It's an anti-immigrant, anti-working class, anti-teaching the real roots of slavery and historic racism, in teaching the proper labor movement and what the labor movement has done for the United States, a people's history, indigenous people's history. I mean, anything you can think of. They even have mathematics and some objectionable materials that are listed under the mathematics section. So anything that we can think of that we know that is not a part of a radically conservative anti-democratic agenda is going to be the consequence. And so the Senate bill, the Senate bill is Senate Bill 148. The House is House Bill 7. The Senate bill is actually up in the Education Committee on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. There was action alerts running around. We haven't created ours yet, but we'll try to make sure that everybody gets a hold of them. We need people to write the Senate Education Committee and ask them to block this bill. This bill only has 2 committees in the Senate, and if you've been around the legislative arena, you know that means they're fast tracking it, and so they're going to fast track this bill and then probably through the Senate, and then probably adapt the House version, which is worse than the Senate, which is what they did on a lot of bills last year. So really depressing stuff.
Yeah, I thought it's 2022 for Christ's sakes, but now I thought we'd be like the Jetsons, right? But it's more like we're in the DeLorean with Doc and Marty. We've gone back in time. I remember fighting for these issues, right? And now we're just reversing everything. It seems like everything is going in reverse. It's ridiculous.
And I hate the dog pile, but there was actually an article recently that I was reading about. There is another House bill that I think is meant to work in tandem with this. It's HB 1055, filed by State Rep Rommel and Beltran, and it would allow for video cameras and microphones to be in classrooms. It would make it much easier to do that. It would make it much easier for parents to essentially request it. And the purpose is really to monitor what is being taught or not. I believe that some of the language in the bill suggests that maybe it's for disabled children. That would be news to me because I don't think Florida Republicans particularly care about the disabled. It's definitely explicitly to try to catch teachers talking about controversial topics. And I think it would also just really harm and impact the privacy and sort of the intimacy of the student-teacher relationship.
I'm glad you brought that up. A version of 1055 actually passed on the higher ed end last legislative session, and a lot of people don't realize that that bill, basically the ability for teachers to teach, especially in an institution of higher education, controversial issues and have students debate about them, is now up for grab. And since 70% of the education force in higher education is not on a tenure track contract, their contracts easily put away with, and so it's going to chill critical thinking and critical education all the way around. So yeah, this is definitely a companion bill.
Yeah, I mean, I find this kind of stuff to be just very disturbing. It's like Orwellian, like the government making these decisions around history. And we could go in a whole tangent about how this country never recovered from like Reconstruction. And that's the root of a lot of our problems. We don't have time, but we will do that live stream one day, and we'll invite back Lakey and Sam to do that with us. All right, y'all. So on to the next horrible bill. this is, oh, I meant to mention about the previous bill. That was also an ALEC model bill as well. So about net metering. So SB 1024, HB 741. It's a bill written by FPL. So I don't know if y'all know, but FPL has had a lot of controversy lately. They've been sponsoring ghost candidates and doing very sketchy things. And one of the things that they're doing is codifying anti-solar utility language into law. And it would actually promote the continued use of toxic fossil fuels as a source of energy. So this will cause the loss of thousands of solar jobs across the state, cut out billions that could be created in economic development.
Yeah, to that Florida Power and Light reference, they drafted the bill for Senator Bradley to file, and then lo and behold, a $10,000 campaign contribution got dropped for Senator Bradley. So it is literally the buy your legislator year.
I want to be shocked, but it doesn't surprise me, unfortunately, that that's how things work. And it's like, once again, it's not an ALEC bill, but this is a bill that was not written by a legislator or, came from a legislator. It was literally written by Florida Power and Light, which is one of the largest power and light companies in the state.
Yeah, and FPL is a member of ALEC, so I'm sure that ALEC cares.
There it goes.
Big member.
There's a connection.
And it's important to say that the people spoke about this issue in 2016. I don't know if you all remember, but Amendment 1, the Citizens Ballot Initiative, did use the same sort of confusing language, made it sound like people thought they were voting for solar. And so the clean energy people had to do a lot of education to let people know that what this bill did was basically limit the ability in Florida to actually have rooftop solar and to allow small businesses to install rooftop solar into personal or local businesses, instead of just having massive, huge solar grids owned by big utility companies. And in 2016, the people of Florida voted no on Amendment 1. And here we have, just 6 years later, we have a very similar piece of language returning. And I just heard last week, I think it was the Tampa Bay Times, I am not quite sure who exposed it, but so the Florida Power and Light themselves only paid out around $480,000 to utility customers for net metering, where there was solar generated from their homes, but they paid $492,000 in campaign contributions. So they literally are paying more for the politics to stop a bill that's not cost. I mean, $500,000 of their entire expenses is just nothing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on to the one good bill that we're going to talk about today, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention another pretty terrible bill that has come up during this legislative session, which is the abortion bill, which would ban abortion after 15 weeks. And, it's something that we saw in other states last year. And I think people saw that Texas did it and that was upheld. And we're seeing it here in our state. And it's, as a person with a uterus, it's terrifying to see. And deeply concerning that, conservative white men in Tallahassee are making decisions for my uterus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really truly for no reason, but playing to a voter base that Ron DeSantis wants, I think, for 2024. I don't think that there is any real meat to the idea that Florida voters are asking for this.
Yeah, polls show that the majority of Florida voters are for reproductive rights and our ability to choose. And I agree. Also, as a person with a uterus, it's scary and it's offensive, especially in the middle of a pandemic when what we should be doing, we have thousands of people hospitalized and the highest COVID numbers that we've seen yet. And we have a governor who is promoting the spread of COVID while also taking away the ability for people to get adequate health care if they have a uterus.
Well, you limit access to healthcare, you limit access to masks and preventative treatments, you refuse to fix unemployment, you refuse to address the housing crisis, and then you gut family planning, reproductive justice. I mean, for anyone, I think works for the working class better than any other class. This is absolutely just the tip of a spear aimed at the heart of the working person in Florida. It's all been to design, and they've been doing it for years. And I think this might be like the pinnacle of that, really.
Or should we say, hopefully? I really can't see it getting any worse than this. These are human rights issues, right? So, I mean, what else could be attacked? Our voting rights have been attacked. Our human rights are being taken away. Our health is in jeopardy with leadership that doesn't seem to care if it's not going to amplify where they're at or where they're going to go. So I just implore everybody to say, how much worse could it be? And how much worse it can, where can we go from here? But to disastrous results. So it is imperative for us to reach out to our legislators, for them to let them know that we are here holding them accountable. The groups that do that, the job on a day-to-day. But as voters, to get out, to get educated, and then to get out and to vote, for sure.
Yeah, I think getting involved is going to be huge, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But getting involved is going to be huge this legislative session. And Juan, I'm with you, but every year I say it can't get worse, and every year they do something and it gets worse.
Yeah, and then I have to remember we're in Florida. Florida man is right around the corner, right?
Right.
Florida man's in the governor's mansion.
Literally.
And the Senate. Two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, though, that Florida, Gillum was just a few points away a couple years ago. Young and powerful, black man who cares about our issues, and he was a few points away of taking the state and flipped traditionally conservative areas like Jacksonville. So people power really works, and I think that the thing that is super important to remember about these bad bills and how bad it can seem in Florida is that we don't get to rest on the laurels of having like a Democratic White House or a Democratic Congress, because what happens when the White House and Congress goes blue is that the state and local attacks are increased. So we need the same kind of energy that people had around Trump, who for what DeSantis' initiatives are, for what Sprawl's and Simpson's initiatives are, for what the legislature is doing, and then hold these people accountable in November. If they're going to pass bills that we know the majority of the state is against, in a redistricting year when they're going to try to redistrict the state to their betterment, right, to their own control, that this is when we know that we live in a place where democracy really wins, right? That even if you're doing it from home. I didn't say even, especially if you're doing it from home, right? If you're 1 or 2 minutes of a phone call, of an email, and writing a letter to an editor, shout it out on Facebook, send them a tweet, right? Like expose them, make a video of yourself. There's so many things that you can be doing to express your voice in this day and age, even in COVID. And so we have the ability to take the reins back, and apply pressure and hold them accountable for what they're doing now. If they're going to do it, let's just make sure that they pay for it in November.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm so glad you said all that, because honestly, one of the things that bothers me the most is the idea that we blame Floridians for what the Floridian government does. And I agree with what you said. I really don't think that we have a Floridian problem so much. I think that there are a powerful elite in Florida politics that are very, very good at maintaining control and screwing people out of being able to vote and have their voices heard. And I definitely think that we all are better at trying to fix that problem when we stop just kind of blanket blaming Florida for what's happening to Florida. Florida's a victim. It needs help, not derangement and disdain.
Yeah, it's a victim of ALEC, right? And Florida Power and Light and a whole bunch of other corporations.
Yeah. Florida Power and Light, who, as we know from the Orlando Sentinel, were running ghost candidates with the help of a couple of shell packs and trying to sway control of the Florida Senate, which we really don't talk enough about.
And they did do it, right? We lost JJR's seat because of what FPL did. And thank goodness, and I'm glad that you said that too, right? Tip the hat to good investigative journalism, right? To non-corporate dominated media that is exposing the real truth, right? That is getting and busting the true false media, right? These ideologues that are sending false messages and making it seem like they have all of the authority and control, and they don't. The people do.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to bring us to talk about the one good bill that we have to highlight today. We're going to leave you off with some good news. Just one. That's all I could find for you. But they get the let out bill. And, I definitely invite Lakey to talk more about this. But this is a bill that would allow for access to clean water in our schools. This is something, for our future, I think would definitely be interested in. And I share that because we've been working a lot on the Build Back Better Act, which is federal legislation that would replace 100% of the lead pipes in the country. And so there's definitely a need to address this issue of lead in our water pipes. This is extremely harmful, especially to children. It can cause adverse health effects. And we have an opportunity to actually get something done. I just invite Lakey to share more.
Thanks. This is a bill designed not by a corporation, but by Physicians for Social Responsibility Florida and our coalition partners. And we went back and forth. It's SB 1648 in the Senate, sponsored by Senator Farmer, and HB 1245, Representative Angie Nixon in Duval County. And we have a broad coalition, and we welcome more partners in the coalition. This bill would cost $0 to the state of Florida. It has a $90 million budget label, but it would cost $0 to the state of Florida. What it does basically, and there's no infrastructure or gutting required of schools. What it does is installs clean drinking water fountains, one for every 100 children in schools across the state, and then puts water filters on cooking and water stations where students and teachers and staff would be drinking or using the water to cook. This year alone, the Congress budgeted through the American Recovery Plan and the Elementary and Secondary, and the ESSER Act, and the emergency relief part of our education system. And they gave Florida $2.3 billion, and the legislature is required to budget about 2/3 of that amount. And so the money that we're asking for is coming straight from the federal government. It would remove lead toxins, which cause neurological problems, behavioral problems. When drunk by a woman with a fetus, it can cause long-term problems, ADHD, ADD. These are the things that, especially in marginalized and low-income children in districts, that funnel kids into a school to prison pipeline, affect their lives forever. Once the lead has been ingested, there's no going back, right? The brain damage is done. The systemic damage is done. It can cause heart and other types of failures. So it is really important that we do this. Most of the people that we talk to actually think it's already been done. They just assume there's no lead in their drinking water in their schools. And in fact, the state of Florida does not even require school boards to test their water. It's an opt-in program. They get the money from the EPA to do it. We got $1.4 million for lead testing last year, and it's only the kind of counties like Broward and Palm Beach and Leon County. And when people force the county to do it, do they test? And what we're finding when the water is tested is that about 50% of the water has some lead content, and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Center for Disease Control are all saying that no lead is good. Like no lead is the only way to go, right? You must remove all the lead. There is no safe lead amount for children. And then we're seeing about 5 to 10% that has rates that are exceeding even the EPA standards and shooting off the charts, right? So we are literally poisoning about 10 to 50% of our children in those districts across the state. And there's only a handful that have already done this, right? Hillsborough is one of them. Leon County is one of them. And that's part of the reason that those counties have applied filters, is because of people organizing, right? Physicians for Social Responsibility, Food and Water Watch, and some others have organized on the ground, and really Florida Council of Churches and others have really gotten involved. And so this is a no-brainer. This is actually a bipartisan, bill initiative. There's no reason we've got some Republicans that are speaking good on the bill. So there's really no reason for them to say no. This is the year to do it. The money disappears after next year. So this is our get this lead out of the water, stop poisoning our children, and support good, healthy, safe schools for our kids.
I think so far this is my favorite bill during legislative session, just because we need to address these inequalities. Like, it's not fair that like certain children are being exposed to lead just because of where they live. Like, that's just not right. Yeah. All right, y'all. So we got through all the bills. We left you with a good one, as we promised. We can move to the next slide. And I want to invite Leahy and Sam to share, how can folks get involved with your organizations?
Well, we have this Tuesday at 7 p.m. We have online. We have our first ever. Actually, we're going to open business meetings for physicians, or open organizing meetings for Physicians for Social Responsibility Florida this year. We'll tell you more about how you can get involved, what you can do. We have 2 guest speakers, one from Rethink Energy and one from from the Sierra Club. I can share the link. You can register and join us. It's a Zoom meeting, and there'll be a question and answer period. We'll follow up with you for legislative issues. If you want to become a water ambassador or clean water ambassador, we can train you how to do that. We're doing all of our meetings with our legislators this session online. We have a massive campaign behind the lead bill, and we're going to join Floridians Against Dirty Energy and fighting to stop that net metering bill. And then, of course, we're going to join a broader coalition to stop the preemption bills, as well as the woke bills, the anti-critical race and anti-everything that we believe in bills. So I will share the link, register for the meeting, join us, and we'll start that conversation with you and get to know you better. Physicians for Social Responsibility is an organization that takes health professionals and doctors and joins them with other people, laymen. You do not need to be a health professional to join us, just a person that's interested in looking at the overlap between health and the environment, or health and nuclear issues. And we also have been taking up the COVID issue, because anything that affects the safety of marginalized communities across the state, the health safety is extremely important, and health equity is our top dog issue. So please, join us, get involved. We can show you how to get involved right where you're at. You don't have to come to Tallahassee. Of course, if you want to come to Tallahassee, we'll help support you to get you there.
Yeah, so Florida for Change, as I've said before, we're a nonprofit that's primarily interested in trying to use informational technology to build equity and try to make it easier for working class folks to be aware of, the bully that is Florida politics and how it impacts us. One of the big things that we're doing right now that ties into this video is we are working on a series of easy to share graphics on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any social media. We're going to break down all of these bills as digestible as possible and include a plan of action, include names and receipts of who is writing them, why they're being written. And it's going to be one card per bill, easy to share. You need to get someone to understand what's going on. Boom, you send them that. So we're trying to roll that out. We're working on a municipal vote tracker. It's going to help people be more aware of what their city councils are up to. And we are working potentially on some interesting stuff around housing justice. I know Bernice knows about this right here in Tampa Bay. And hopefully we'll have some news on that. If you follow us on social media, you'll be able to get involved when we have actions to get involved with. And besides that, we are launching new episodes of our Changecast. We are on Spotify. That is the Florida for Change podcast. We're talking to people like these, really just about issues that matter. Upcoming episodes, we're going to be talking to Lucinda Johnston, who is the Progressive DEC chair in Pinellas County. We're going to be talking to Professor Mikey McDowell about the nature of language and rhetoric in politics. Just trying to educate people and make sure that people have the tools that they need.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. We can move to the next slide. And for folks who want to get involved with For Our Future, definitely recommend joining our Facebook groups. It's kind of a hub for our activities. So we post the phone banks that we do and different events and news articles and stuff talking about what's going on in the world. So I highly recommend you check out our Facebook groups. We have one by different regions. So there's one for Central Florida, South Florida, West Florida. You can go to forflorida.us/Facebook groups. And want to take a second to thank our guests for being on. Lakey and Sam, we couldn't have done it without you. This would have been a very different panel without you. So we just appreciate so much y'all taking the time to be on here with us today. And definitely hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
To be here. Yeah, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Hopefully next time we'll have more good news.
Take care, guys.